צופים יקרים, אני טל אורנן, ואני מארח כאן היום באנגלית את פרופסור פרנסיסקו וויט, Management of Reality, ואת יגאל מיכאל מימון היקר, היסטוריון, איש סיירת מטכ"ל לשעבר וגם שרת ביחידה שלי. עוד מעט נפנה אליהם, אבל בינתיים אתם מוזמנים להצטרף ל-130,000 המנויים שלנו של ערוץ טוב. תהיו חלק מהקהילה שלנו, תצטרפו בלינק מתחת לנגן. And let's start our conversation with Professor Francesco White, Management of Reality, and Yigal Michael Maimon, an historian, served in the IDF in the Matkal Brigade, and later even in my unit, our intelligence unit. I'd like to ask you both the same questions. Do Israel speak the language of the Middle East? Do we do enough, though we have been winning in 7 different fronts? Do we do enough in order to defeat our enemies? I'll start with you, Francesco.
I'm sorry to disagree with you, Tal. I think you've been losing. So initially, yes, the IDF was advancing against its enemies, but except for Hezbollah right now, you're losing because on every front, the Israeli government has acquiesced to the insistence of the US government that they must lose the wars that they were winning. So the US government stopped the Israelis in Gaza, stopped them in Lebanon, stopped them in Syria, stopped them in Iran. They're protecting Qatar. They installed jihadis in Syria, and so on and on.
What happened?
But the language, but your point about the language of the Middle East is very important, because the language of the Middle East is the language of force. So if Israel wants to change the security situation it is in the Middle East, it has to finish its wars. It has to completely defeat its terrorist enemies, and only then will the security situation really change.
Yigal, you have a lot of experience in your army service, in your intelligence service, and you certainly know a bit of the actual battlefield. What do you think? Do we cope with it in the correct way these days?
As far as using the language, we had a problem for many years of using different or not the correct language in terms of philosophy, not only language. I mean, the culture behind the language. I think until a very specific point, which is the October 7th, this is when we started to see some awakeness and change of the concept and the way we attend the Middle East issues. I give you an example. For many years, we refused to recognize that what is motivating and driving our enemies has a lot to do with Islam, to a point that we were, and until now, some of us are trying to distinguish between Hamas and the PLO, because the PLO supposedly is a secular, national, not religious movement, which is not true. That comes from the Western European point of view that we are using, and we projecting it on the Middle East, on the Arabs.
I'd like to stop you here just for a question, because it's important that the point that you're raising is very, very important. Is the reason is that we don't understand it, or the reason was that we understood that if we fight those 4 countries around us, as we fought in the past, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, might be more possible than fighting 1.5 billion Muslims?
Well,
meaning if we define it as a war against Islam, we have no way to win it. That's what I mean.
I don't talk of our war against them. I'm talking about their war against us. Okay. And their war against us is always combined integrally with the Islam in it. And I was about to give an example. Yeah. Arafat is still considered in Israel as a national secular leader, but he is not. His origins are from the Muslim Brothers in the university in Cairo. That's a fact. But no, he didn't study in Azhar. He studied engineering in Cairo University. However, when he opened the most important ultimative war against us in October 2000, he named it with the name Al-Aqsa War. And this means everything. That's a religious word. Now, one more point in this regard. I remember an interview with Netanyahu where I think it was Amit Segal who was talking to him about the situation in the Temple Mount. And he said, what do you want? You want us to open a religious war? But as I said, it's not up to us what kind of war it is. It's a religious war from their point of view. We can analyze it or define it in our ways just for technicalities. That's how we're going to defeat the Syrian army, the Egyptian, the Jordanian, or the situation in Lebanon. But in the essence, it's a war, Arabic Islamic war against Israel.
Well, we'll take a commercial break and then we'll go on with the discussion. Thank you.
כיצד ייצב אהרון ברק את מערכת המשפט ואת פני המדינה, והאם חזון השיבה שופטינו כבראשונה הוא תקווה שניתן להגשים או אשליה רחוקה? שלום, אני דוקטור חיים שיין, משפטן ומרצה. אני מזמין אתכם להרצאה מעמיקה ומעוררת מחשבה על עתיד מערכת המשפט בישראל במועדון הגולה בפתח תקווה. נתראה. בלעדי לחברי מועדון היחידה, סדרת הרצאות עם מיטב המומחים בישראל בנושאים שמעסיקים את כולנו, קהילה, תוכן, עומק, להצטרפות למועדון היחידה ולרכישת כרטיסים להרצאה, לחצו על הקישור שמתחת לנגן.
חברים, כל הפרטים מתחת לנגן, אתם יכולים להתחבר עם הקישור, ואנחנו נמשיך בשיחה שלנו. Francesco, I'd like to ask you, do you think that in today's world situation, with the relationship with Europe, with Europe attitude, Keir Starmer's, Macron's, Chancellor Merz, can Israel simply take the lead in its war against that Islamist, I would say, obsession, which attacks Europe as well in different ways, but it attacks Europe as well?
Well, I mean, Israel is taking the lead to a certain extent because it has no choice. I think Yigal is absolutely right when he says that this is a religious war, and it is not our choice to make it religious. It is our Muslim enemies who are making it a religious war, because their entire theology is war. So Westerners have been hearing from so-called experts for decades now that Islam supposedly is the religion of peace. That's what they keep telling us. But Islam is the religion of war. It's written into their whole theology. Jihad is the central concept in Islam, and the Prophet Muhammad was a warrior, and he was not a clean warrior. He was exterminating entire tribes and raping women and stealing land and so on and so forth. So that's that, and he's the normative model to follow. So obviously this is a religious war, and I want to support what Yigal said about PLO Fatah. And Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, and their cronies, because he is absolutely right that they are every bit as jihadi as Hezbollah and the Iranian Ayatollahs. In fact, and the reason people don't know or don't understand this is that everybody has forgotten somehow what was reported on the front page of the New York Times in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution happened, when the Iranian Islamic Revolution happened. What the New York Times explained on the front page, and of course they were not alone, everybody talked about it at the time, was that PLO Fatah, Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, and their friends in the state within a state that they had in Lebanon during the 1970s, they were training and arming Ayatollah Khomeini's guerrillas. And when those guerrillas succeeded in taking power in Iran in 1979, the first thing that Ayatollah Khomeini did was send an airplane to pick up Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, and their friends, bring them over to Tehran to celebrate with Khomeini the Islamic Revolution, and they promised that they would together destroy and genocide the Israeli Jews. And the top people at PLO Fatah helped Ayatollah Khomeini to create the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the institution that exports terrorism all over the world and is the creator of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah came into Lebanon to replace PLO Fatah because Menachem Begin expelled PLO Fatah from Lebanon in 1982. So the PLO Fatah's creation, which is the jihadi regime in Iran plus Hezbollah, was coming in to replace PLO Fatah when they left Lebanon. It's all one program. It's one movement. And any attempt to represent PLO Fatah as somehow independent of Iran or somehow secular is erasing history. And it has been erased. The relationship between PLO Fatah and Iran.
You talk about
Absolutely.
Husseini all the time.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Haj Amin al-Husseini is the founder of Fatah, and he also was a jihadist. So from whichever angle you look at it, these people are obviously jihadis.
I want to ask you both a question.
Okay,
take the lead and I'll ask a question later. Yeah.
Okay, one more thing we need to we define the Arab world and the Islamic world in definition that we brought from Europe, from the Western world. By the way, between the parentheses, we do the same thing to Judaism. We define it by Western definitions, which is wrong as well. In the Arab world and the Islamic world, it's integral. This distinction that was thought about in Germany or in Europe, that there is religion and there is secularism and nationalism, it's maybe true for Europe. It's not true in the Middle East. And by the way, it's not true as well among us in the people of Israel, which is a different subject, but I have to mention this as well.
I'd like to ask you both a question. Just yesterday there was an incident in Northern Ireland, not in Ireland. And there is a difference between Northern Ireland and Ireland, because Northern Ireland is Protestant, and you have, part of it is Protestant, and it's been controlled by the British government, of course. It's not independent. There was a guy who basically tried to cut off a person's head. He's someone who immigrated to Northern Ireland. As a result, there are a lot of demonstrations there. Do you think that they see the connection between those immigrants, Islam, and Islam invasion, and then connect it to Israel's struggle against those countries like Iran, like Lebanon, like Hezbollah, all those proxies and organizations? Do you think we are getting to the point where people in Europe really understand what we are going through, and it's their war as well? Because there was, I'll give you another piece of information. In the last 3 or 4 years, and it's a funny information, maybe to connect with our conversation, but it does show something. In the last 4 years, Israel has been sending songs to the Eurovision competition. And you keep on seeing the audiences versus the judges voting for Israel, meaning they don't abide with the anti-Semitism or with the anti-Israel sentiment. Francesco, what do you think about it?
Well, I think it's certainly true that some people are getting it. And some people in Europe have gotten it from the beginning. So, for example, right now, the biggest movement against the Muslim invasion in Great Britain is led by Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson has always been an ally of Israel. He's always been an ally of the Jewish people. He has been a stalwart defender of the Jewish people against the attacks of Muslims, and a stalwart defender of the Europeans, and in particular Britons, against the attacks of Muslims. And his movement is a giant movement. So there's a lot of people who get it. particularly in Britain. But I think it is happening in other parts of Europe as well. So hopefully that trend will continue, because we need the Europeans to defend themselves. We need them to defend Western civilization and to break out of this managed reality that has convinced them that the way to, or at least a lot of people, that the way to be a moral person in the modern world is to support the jihadis who want to kill the Jews.
Igor, what do you think about it?
Well, I think that some portion of the public opinion or the nations of Europe have this awareness and understand what they are facing, which is an invasion of Islam and occupation, which is going to be an occupation. But I think they are what is called silent majority so far in many of these countries. That's why you see them in the Eurovision, etc. On the other hand, you have the governments and the European Union as an establishment, which are both very calculated with the electoral factor, which are now many Muslims in Europe are voting. They have electoral vote power. So that's why you see in Brussels a very strong anti-Israeli spirit, and that's why you see in certain countries like in France, England, Ireland, even in Germany to a certain point, and others, anti-Israeli attitude, because they are looking to their constituency, which is partly Muslims. On the other hand, when you see countries which has not been exposed to immigration, Islamic immigration, like Poland or Hungary, and at least until recent, the previous leader, what's his name? Orban, you see a very pro-Israeli. Why? Because they are in synchronizing. They are synchronized with the public opinion of their people. In England, in France, the public opinion who live in the countryside, they are very supportive to Israel. They are the grassroots. However, the administration, or what we call the deep state, or the leading elite in those countries, which are connected with the political fractions and the political powers, are anti-Israelis, even though they are minorities. Like we have the same situation in Israel, that minority has more power through the deep state and other ways than the masses of the people.
It kind of makes me ask a very significant question. Have we, as Israelis, been freed from that shtetl mentality of being afraid for ourselves, and therefore our policies towards Europe, towards other countries, are still kind of fearing to show some strong position towards what Israel should do or could do? When it comes to Europe, for example, we have that kind of agreements with Greece and Cyprus, but I start thinking, and I actually said that, it might be sounding very extreme, that maybe one day we'll find ourselves in a situation where the Israeli Air Force will have to turn west. Do you think that might be the reality we're going to face in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
To attack who in the west?
Let's start with Eagle and then go to Francisco.
Okay, go on.
No, Eagle, you may start.
No, my question was that you're talking about the Israeli Air Force will go west against whom?
Yeah, I took it to the extremes. In case, for example, England is becoming more hostile, France is hostile, in a way that we'll find ourselves in a more extreme situation with these countries.
I understand. But as to your question about the shtetl mentality, and the state of Israel, I think we are in a transitional period. We are in this a transitional stage, which is long, is not going to be short. But I think that a lot of things started to get a lot of drive, a strong drive since the October 7, that people woke up and started to open their eyes, and they were facing reality in a very brutal manner. However, we have to move from that. It's not simple, because people have to get rid of old concepts, and the old concept in Israel, which is still current and still dominant, is the mentality of the shtetl, the mentality that we have to rely or to look to our big brother or big uncle in Uncle Sam in the US, or our supporters in Europe, etc. Because truly enough, at the beginning years of this state, we needed foreign aid, foreign support from England, from France, from America. No more. I think still people in Israel start to understand that we became stronger demographically. We are no more 2.5 million or 4 million people in Israel. We are 10 million, even including the Arab minority. We are 10 million, which is a critical mass that are giving us the ability to feel more independent in one hand. On the other hand, the awakeness of the October 7, which Professor Francesco defined very interestingly as the second Holocaust or genocide, which is interesting. I would like to hear from him about that.
Real time
However,
Holocaust in a way, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we are in the stage of understanding that we are still cannot get rid of our habits of looking outside. And that's what leads me, at least, to a concept that we start, instead of looking to the West, we have to look to the East, meaning to the Middle East, meaning to the Mesopotamia area, and to find our allies in that region, which is a very divided to many ethnic groups, like the Kurds, the Druze, the Maronites, the Sunnis, and the Alawis, and we have to consider them as our future geopolitical allies, instead of looking for allies and support in the West or even in America.
Francesco, I want to add another detail to my question. Israel's economy is coming out of this war, which didn't end yet, but still 2.5 years of war, almost 3 years of war, in a very strong position. We see the shekel, which, versus the dollar, it got really stronger, less than 3 shekels a dollar, versus the euro as well, and the English pound. Israel is loaning money instead of is actually loaning money to other countries other than loan itself. The economy has the macro, I would say, data is pretty good. Are we getting to a point where we need to shift our relationships with Europe, since we are much stronger than ever?
Well, I think that relationship should have shifted a very long time ago. Yeah, I think the shift you're talking about should definitely happen. Now, about the galut mentality, I agree completely with you, Gal. I think the definition of the galut in terms of psychology and culture, what is that? It's Jews trying to please the anti-Semites. That's what it is. That's what the galut mentality is. And once you're in your own country with your own Jewish government, why the hell are you trying to please the anti-Semites? The fact that you're still trying to do that, the fact that the Israeli government still won't take a single step until the anti-Semitic US president gives permission, is the very definition of still being in the galut. So Yes, I think, for example, the one politician that is clearly talking about this is Moshe Feiglin. What he's saying, I think, is completely true. He says that the Israeli Jews need to recover their identity. I think that's absolutely true. They have to recover their identity based on the traditional Jewish values that are anchored in the Torah and in the historical mission of the Jewish people, which is Or Lagoyim, to be the light unto the nations, to save the entire world. When the Jews recover that identity as the nation that is here on earth to liberate the entire planet, they will stop trying to please the anti-Semites, they will recover their own government, and they will win all of their wars, and they will bless all of Western civilization like they have been doing for 2,000 years.
Wow, on that note, I think it's a great note to end our conversation. And may I remind us all that in actually this year, we are finally having more Jews in the world than we had previous the Holocaust. So previous
I was
to the
about
Holocaust.
to say something about that. I
Yeah,
was about to
so
say something.
maybe it's a great
we are
note to
finished.
end. Well,
Okay.
Igal, just say it. Let me give you another note about that.
Okay, since we reached that point of the strong economy of Israel, which is unique phenomena, is extraordinary phenomena, a country in a war like we are, getting to a point that it is the strongest economy in the world. And if I may end with what is called note of fate, a friend of mine, Rabbi Moshe Armoni, predicted in 1999, based on his knowledge in the Torah and Kabbalah, that he was following the increase of the demographic increase in Israel. And he said that the minute Israel will have more Jews in Eretz Israel than in America, we will see at that point a decline of the American and the West economy and increase of the Israeli economy. And guess what?
That's
It
what
happened
happening.
in 2008. 2008, the number of Jews became the biggest number of Jews in the world in Eretz Israel.
Yeah.
And we are, and this year, America faced the biggest crisis of the, what is called
The subprime crisis,
yes, which lost trillions of dollars. And then from that point, and one can see the facts, Israel started the increase that haven't stopped since then until today.
Okay, so we have
Which
another
is-
good note
has to
to
do
end
with
the
the
conversation.
critic mass, yes.
Okay, I thank you, both of you, for an interesting discussion. Professor Francesco Gil-White, Management of Reality, and Igal Michael Maimon, a friend and an historian. Thank you very much. And לכם, צופים יקרים, אתם מוזמנים להצטרף אלינו בקישור מתחת לנגן, על מנת להמשיך לקבל שיחות כאלה מעניינות בעברית ובאנגלית בהמשך. תודה ולהתראות.
כיצד עיצב אהרן ברק את מערכת המשפט ואת פני המדינה, והאם חזון השיבה שופטינו כבראשונה הוא תקווה שניתן להגשים או אשליה רחוקה? שלום, אני דוקטור חיים שיין, משפטן ומרצה. אני מזמין אתכם להרצאה מעמיקה ומעוררת מחשבה על עתיד מערכת המשפט בישראל במועדון הגולה בפתח תקווה. נתראה.
בלעדי לחברי מועדון היחידה, סדרת הרצאות עם מיטב המומחים בישראל בנושאים שמעסיקים את כולנו, קהילה, תוכן, עומק. להצטרפות למועדון היחידה ולרכישת כרטיסים להרצאה, לחצו על הקישור שמתחת לנגן.